They told him power came from money, status, or the ability to dominate a room with noise. But Marcus learned something far more dangerous in silence. At 32, he had already watched 3 relationships collapse in front of him like buildings with weak foundations. Every time, the story ended the same way. Confusion. Distance. Emotional games he never understood until it was too late. One night, sitting alone in his apartment while rain hammered against the windows, he opened an old journal written by his grandfather, a man who survived war, betrayal, and hardship without ever losing control of himself. Inside the first page was a sentence that would change Marcus forever. The man who cannot govern emotion will always become a servant to someone else's chaos. He read it once, then again, and again. That night he stopped blaming women, stopped blaming dating, stopped blaming the world. Instead, he began studying human nature. What he discovered shocked him. Most men chase approval. They react emotionally, speak impulsively, explain themselves too much, and surrender their peace for temporary affection. But the rare man, the Stoic man, understands something different. Every person has emotional patterns, triggers, weaknesses, needs they try desperately to hide. And once you understand them, you stop being manipulated by them. The first weakness Marcus discovered was attention. Not beauty, not charm. Attention. He noticed how modern society trained women to crave constant validation. Social media became an endless marketplace of approval where likes replaced self-worth. Most men competed desperately for a glance, a reply, a fragment of acknowledgement. Marcus stopped competing. While others flooded messages with compliments and desperation, he became calm, measured, and emotionally independent. The effect was immediate. Women who once ignored him suddenly noticed his absence of need. Because attention loses value when given freely. Scarcity creates gravity. The second weakness was emotional certainty. Most people are addicted to emotional stimulation. Drama feels alive to them. Uncertainty becomes intoxicating. Marcus realized that the more emotionally reactive a man became, the more power he surrendered. So he mastered restraint. When challenged, he stayed composed. When ignored, he stayed focused. When tested, he never rushed to prove himself. And strangely, the less he reacted, the more magnetic he became. People began projecting strength onto his silence. The third weakness was the fear of irrelevance. Marcus noticed how quickly attraction changed when a woman felt she was no longer the center of a man's world. Men who abandoned purpose for affection always lost respect in the end. But men obsessed with mission, discipline, and growth created an aura that could not be replicated. Purpose became his advantage. He woke before sunrise, trained his body, built his business quietly, spoke less, observed more. And while others chased relationships to escape emptiness, Marcus built a life so complete that attachment became optional. That was when everything changed. One evening at a rooftop gathering overlooking the city lights, he met Elena. She was beautiful in the kind of way that silenced conversations when she entered a room. Every man around her performed like an actor seeking applause. Marcus didn't. He listened, watched, said little. For the first time in years, Elena found herself trying to impress someone. That disturbed her. She leaned closer throughout the night, asking deeper questions, searching for emotional openings, testing boundaries subtly the way intelligent people do when they want to understand someone's weaknesses. But Marcus had spent years mastering himself. And self-mastery makes a man difficult to control. As weeks passed, Elena became fascinated by him. Not because he played games, but because he refused to surrender his inner peace for external validation. She sensed something rare, emotional stability. Most men became consumed by her attention. Marcus remained centered. One night she finally asked him, "Why does nothing seem to shake you?" He looked at her quietly before answering. "Because I learned that whoever controls my emotions controls my life." The room fell silent. And for the first time, Elena realized she was no longer dealing with a man driven by fear, loneliness, or desire for approval. She was facing a man who understood the psychology beneath attraction itself. A man who recognized that many emotional tests are unconscious attempts to measure strength. A man who knew that insecurity often hides behind confidence. A man who understood that emotional dependency destroys respect faster than rejection ever could. But Marcus also understood something darker. Knowledge without discipline becomes manipulation. And many men, once they discover these truths, become arrogant, cold, calculating. They confuse Stoicism with emotional cruelty. They think power means domination. Marcus refused that path. Because real Stoicism was never about controlling women. It was about refusing to be controlled by weakness, within yourself or anyone else. Still, Elena could feel the shift happening inside her. The more centered Marcus became, the more uncertain she felt around him. His calmness exposed the chaos most people hide beneath charm and beauty. Around him, masks became difficult to maintain. And that terrified her more than she admitted. One evening she disappeared for 3 days without explanation. No messages. No calls. Silence. Most men would panic. Double text. Demand answers. Marcus simply continued living his life. He trained. Worked. Read. Slept peacefully. Then on the 4th night, his phone lit up. "I didn't expect you to stay so calm." Marcus stared at the message for a moment before replying with a single sentence. "Peace is expensive. I stopped giving it away for free." And somewhere in the silence that followed, Elena began realizing she was no longer testing him anymore. She was testing whether she could handle a man who truly understood himself. For several minutes, no reply came. Marcus placed the phone face down on the table and returned to his book. Outside his apartment window, the city pulsed with noise, ambition, distraction, and people desperately searching for meaning in temporary things. But inside, there was only stillness. At midnight, another message appeared. "You really don't chase anyone, do you?" He smiled faintly. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that he had finally learned the difference between caring and losing control. Years earlier, that silence would have destroyed him. He would have replayed conversations in his head, questioned his worth, searched for reassurance in someone else's attention. Now he understood something most men never realize. Neediness is not love. Attachment is not strength. And emotional dependency disguises itself as passion more often than people admit. The next time Marcus saw Elena, she looked different. Not physically. Her beauty was still impossible to ignore. But beneath her confidence, there was curiosity now, and something else. Uncertainty. She studied him over dinner as if trying to solve a puzzle that refused to open. "You know," she said softly, swirling the glass in her hand, "most men become easier to predict once they like someone." Marcus leaned back calmly. "That's because most men abandon discipline the moment emotions appear." Elena narrowed her eyes slightly. "And you don't?" "I acknowledge emotions," he replied. "I just don't allow them to drive." That answer stayed in her mind longer than he realized. Because deep down, she had spent years encountering 2 types of men, those who tried to dominate emotionally and those who surrendered completely. Marcus belonged to neither category. And that made him dangerous. Over time, she began revealing parts of herself she rarely showed anyone. The insecurities beneath confidence. The fear of aging. The exhaustion of constantly maintaining an image. The pressure to remain desirable in a world addicted to appearances. Marcus listened without judgment. That was the 4th weakness he had discovered. Many people hide fragile self-worth beneath external beauty. The world praises appearance relentlessly but rarely teaches inner peace. So people become trapped in endless cycles of comparison, validation, and anxiety. Marcus saw it everywhere now. The need to feel chosen, admired, irreplaceable. And once you see it, human behavior becomes painfully transparent. One evening Elena asked him something unexpectedly direct. "Do you ever get jealous?" Marcus paused. "Jealousy comes from fear of losing something," he said. "I stopped treating people like possessions a long time ago." She looked away after that. Because those words carried freedom, but also terrifying emotional weight. Most relationships survive on subtle ownership, silent expectations, emotional bargaining, invisible chains disguised as affection. Marcus had broken those chains within himself, and people could feel it. Weeks later, Elena invited him to a private party filled with wealthy entrepreneurs, influencers, and celebrities. The room overflowed with performance. Loud laughter, forced confidence, men competing for attention with watches, status, and stories designed to impress. Marcus remained quiet. As the night unfolded, Elena noticed something unsettling. People gravitated toward him naturally. Not because he demanded attention, but because he seemed completely untouched by the desperation surrounding everyone else. That was the fifth weakness Marcus understood. Most people are controlled by the need for approval. The moment someone becomes free from that addiction, they become powerful in ways others cannot explain. At some point during the evening, another man approached Elena aggressively, wrapping confidence around insecurity like expensive clothing. He interrupted Marcus mid-conversation and began subtly trying to establish dominance. Marcus simply smiled politely and stepped back. No confrontation. No ego battle. No need to prove superiority. Later that night, Elena asked, "Why didn't that bother you?" Marcus looked at the skyline beyond the balcony. "Because insecure people want reactions," he answered. "Silence frustrates them more than anger ever could." She stared at him quietly. Every answer he gave seemed to reveal another layer of discipline she wasn't used to seeing in modern men. And the deeper her attraction grew, the more emotionally exposed she began to feel. That was when the balance shifted completely. For the first time in years, Elena started fearing loss. Not because Marcus threatened to leave. Not because he manipulated her emotions. But because his life clearly existed independently of her presence. He wanted her, but he did not need her. And that distinction changed everything. One cold evening, they walked together through empty streets washed in silver rain. Elena suddenly stopped beneath a flickering streetlight and asked the question she had avoided for months. "What if I disappeared one day?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "I would be grateful for the memories," he said calmly. "And then I would continue my path." The honesty of that answer hit harder than any dramatic declaration ever could. No begging. No emotional collapse. No dependency. Just strength wrapped in peace. Elena felt something tighten in her chest. Because she realized most men had offered obsession. Marcus offered presence. And presence is far rarer. That night, as rain echoed softly against the windows of his apartment, Elena sat beside him in silence. No games. No tests. No performances left to maintain. For once, she looked emotionally unguarded. Marcus closed his book slowly. "You know what the biggest weakness is?" he asked quietly. She turned toward him. He held her gaze for several seconds before answering. Most people never master themselves, so they spend their entire lives trying to control others instead. And in that moment, Elena understood something terrifying about Marcus. The real source of his power had never been psychology. Never manipulation. Never emotional tactics. It was the fact that he had faced loneliness, rejection, desire, ego, fear, and attachment within himself, and survived all of them without surrendering his identity. That is what made him different. And somewhere deep inside, Elena began wondering whether she had ever truly met a man before him, or only boys searching for validation behind adult masks. The silence between them deepened. Not awkward. Not empty. But heavy with truths most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Elena lowered her eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of his words while the rain continued tracing slow lines across the glass beside them. In another life, she would have challenged him. Turned the conversation into a game. Deflected vulnerability with charm and sarcasm the way she always had. But Marcus created an unusual effect on people. Around him, pretending became exhausting. "You make everything sound so simple," she whispered. Marcus shook his head slightly. "It's not simple. It's painful." She looked at him again. Then why do it? Because avoiding truth costs more. Those words lingered in the room long after he spoke them. Elena had spent years mastering attraction, social intelligence, emotional influence. She knew how to draw people in, how to make conversations addictive, how to become unforgettable in someone's mind. But Marcus had mastered something far more rare: detachment without coldness. And the deeper she fell into his world, the more she realized how emotionally dependent modern people had become without noticing it. Everywhere she looked, people needed constant stimulation, constant reassurance, constant proof that they mattered. Silence frightened them. Distance weakened them. Being alone exposed them. Marcus, however, seemed completely at peace in solitude. That was the sixth weakness he had learned to recognize. Most people cannot sit alone with their own thoughts. So they distract themselves endlessly, with relationships, attention, entertainment, noise, social media, meaningless conversations, temporary pleasures. Anything to avoid confronting themselves. One afternoon Elena arrived unexpectedly at his apartment. Marcus opened the door wearing training clothes, sweat still visible on his neck after a workout. "You weren't answering," she said. "I was busy." No apology. No elaborate explanation. Just truth. She stepped inside slowly, watching him move through the apartment with calm precision. Everything about his life reflected discipline. Books stacked neatly. Phone notifications disabled. No chaos. No emotional clutter. "You really live like this every day?" she asked. Marcus poured water into a glass. "Peace requires maintenance." Elena laughed softly, though something inside her felt unsettled again. Because she was beginning to understand that Marcus' strength was not natural talent. It was built. Every calm reaction. Every measured word. Every moment of restraint. Forged through years of internal war no one ever saw. That realization changed the way she looked at him. Most people admire confidence without understanding the suffering required to create it. Later that evening, Elena sat across from him as sunset painted the room gold and amber. She watched him reading quietly and finally asked the question she had been carrying for weeks. "What broke you?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained on the page for several seconds before he closed the book carefully. "Expectation," he said at last. She stayed silent. "I expected loyalty from selfish people. Honesty from dishonest people. Permanence from temporary people." His voice remained calm, but Elena could hear the scars beneath it. "So what changed?" Marcus leaned back slowly. "I stopped expecting the world to protect my peace," he replied, "and learned to protect it myself." Something about that answer hit Elena harder than she expected. Because beneath all his composure was pain. Not weakness. Not bitterness. Pain transformed into wisdom. And suddenly she understood why his presence felt so different from other men. Most people leak unresolved wounds into every relationship they enter. Their trauma controls them invisibly. Their insecurities speak through jealousy, anger, possessiveness, and emotional instability. Marcus had done the opposite. He turned suffering into discipline. That was the seventh weakness. Unhealed emotions make people predictable. The insecure seek control. The lonely seek attachment. The wounded seek validation. And the unaware repeat the same emotional patterns endlessly. But self-awareness breaks cycles. One night Elena invited Marcus to meet a few close friends at an upscale lounge downtown. Throughout the evening, she noticed the women observing him carefully. Some flirted openly. Others tried subtly pulling his attention toward themselves. Marcus treated everyone kindly, but never excessively. No performance. No thirst for approval. No need to dominate attention. Afterward, while driving through the quiet city streets, Elena finally asked what had been bothering her. "How do you stay unaffected by attention?" Marcus looked out the window. Because attention means nothing without respect. That answer silenced her. For years, she had confused attraction with value, desire with importance, popularity with connection. And suddenly she saw how fragile those things really were. The next few weeks brought an unexpected shift between them. Elena stopped testing him. No delayed replies. No emotional games. No calculated distance designed to provoke reactions. For the first time in a long time, she simply existed honestly around someone. And strangely, that frightened her more than manipulation ever had. Because manipulation keeps control alive. Honesty risks rejection. One evening, while they sat together on a rooftop overlooking the sleeping city, Elena finally admitted something she had never confessed aloud before. "I think most people are terrified of being ordinary." Marcus nodded slowly. "They are. And you're not." He turned toward her. "I realized ordinary people chase extraordinary attention because they never built extraordinary character." The wind moved softly between them. Elena stared at him, her expression unreadable now. "You always know exactly what to say." Marcus gave a faint smile. "No," he replied quietly. "I just spent years learning what actually matters." Far below them, traffic lights flickered like distant stars while the city continued racing endlessly toward distractions disguised as fulfillment. But high above the noise, something inside Elena was changing. For the first time in years, she no longer wanted excitement. No games. No chaos. No emotional roller coasters pretending to be passion. She wanted peace. And that terrified her. Because peace demands honesty, discipline, patience, self-control. Things modern people often avoid until suffering forces them to learn. Marcus looked out across the skyline, unaware of the storm unfolding quietly inside her mind. Then he spoke again, his voice calm enough to almost disappear into the wind. "The strongest person in the room is usually the one who no longer needs to prove anything." And Elena realized, with a strange ache in her chest, that nearly everyone she had ever met was performing. Performing confidence. Performing happiness. Performing power. But Marcus had become real. That realization stayed with Elena for days. Real. Such a simple word, yet almost no one truly embodied it anymore. Everywhere she looked, people edited themselves for acceptance. Conversations became performances. Emotions became strategies. Even love often felt transactional, an unspoken exchange of attention, validation, security, and ego. But Marcus moved differently. He never tried to appear impressive. And somehow, that made him unforgettable. One evening Elena found herself scrolling through old photos on her phone. Faces from parties she barely remembered. Men she once thought were important. Expensive dinners. Luxury vacations. Smiles frozen beneath artificial lighting. For the first time, all of it looked strangely empty. Because Marcus had unknowingly ruined illusion for her. Once you experience depth, superficiality becomes exhausting. That was the eighth weakness Marcus understood. Most people confuse stimulation with fulfillment. They chase intensity because they are disconnected from peace. Loud emotions make them feel alive temporarily, even when those emotions are toxic. Chaos becomes addictive. Marcus had once been addicted too. He remembered the old version of himself clearly now, the man who over-explained, over-gave, over-chased. The man who feared silence because silence forced him to confront insecurity. Back then, rejection felt like destruction. Now it felt like redirection. One afternoon, Elena asked him something unexpected while they walked through a quiet bookstore downtown. "Do you think people can really change?" Marcus traced his fingers along the spine of an old philosophy book before answering. "Only when pain becomes unbearable." She frowned slightly. "That sounds dark." "It's honest." He looked at her calmly. "Most people wait until suffering humiliates them before they grow. Until loneliness breaks them. Until betrayal wakes them up. Until failure strips away their illusions." Elena absorbed those words quietly. Because deep inside, she knew he was right. Comfort rarely transforms anyone. Pain does. As weeks passed, she began noticing changes within herself she couldn't explain. She spoke less impulsively. She spent more time alone without needing distraction. She stopped posting parts of her life online simply to feel seen. Marcus never asked her to change. That was what made the transformation real. Influence without force is powerful. One night they attended a formal event hosted inside a towering hotel overlooking the city. Wealthy guests floated through the ballroom wrapped in elegance and hidden in security. Conversations revolved around success, status, influence, appearances. Marcus observed quietly. Elena noticed something fascinating throughout the evening. Powerful men kept trying to impress him. Not openly. Subtly. Name-dropping. Bragging disguised as storytelling. Small ego battles hidden beneath politeness. Marcus never competed. And because he refused to compete, he unconsciously dominated every interaction. That was the ninth weakness. Ego controls people more than they realize. Most individuals are trapped in invisible wars for significance. They need to feel superior, smarter, more attractive, more respected. Their identity depends on external comparison. Marcus had escaped that prison. Not perfectly, but consciously. At some point during the event, an older businessman pulled Elena aside privately. "Your friend," the man said carefully, glancing toward Marcus across the room, "is unusual." Elena smiled faintly. "I know. There's something dangerous about men like that." She looked at Marcus again. He was standing near the balcony alone, completely comfortable in silence while everyone else fought desperately to be noticed. The businessman lowered his voice. "Men who master themselves become very difficult to manipulate." Those words echoed in Elena's mind long after the conversation ended. Later that night, inside the quiet warmth of Marcus' apartment, she finally asked him the question that had been growing heavier inside her for months. "Were you always like this?" Marcus laughed softly for the first time that evening. "No." He sat down slowly, his expression distant now. "I used to think strength meant controlling outcomes, controlling people, controlling relationships. And now I think strength is controlling yourself when life refuses to go your way." The room fell silent again. Marcus looked toward the dark city skyline beyond the window. "There was a time," he continued quietly, "when losing someone could destroy my focus for weeks. I abandoned routines, lost discipline, let emotions pull me in every direction." Elena listened carefully. "What changed?" Marcus' eyes hardened slightly, not with anger, but memory. "I realized emotional instability was costing me my future." Those words carried weight because they were earned. Not learned from books. Not borrowed from quotes. Earned through suffering. He continued speaking, his voice calm and measured. "Most people underestimate how much damage uncontrolled emotion creates. One moment of loneliness can make someone tolerate disrespect. One moment of insecurity can destroy years of discipline. One emotional impulse can ruin an entire life." Elena felt chills rise along her arms. Because every sentence sounded painfully true. Marcus turned toward her fully now. "That's why self-mastery matters," he said. "Not to manipulate others. To protect yourself from becoming weak in moments that matter." For a long time neither of them spoke. The air between them felt different tonight. Heavier. More honest. Then Elena asked the question she had feared asking. "Do you ever feel afraid anymore?" Marcus was quiet for several seconds. "Yes." The honesty surprised her. "Of what?" He looked directly into her eyes. "Becoming unconscious again." She frowned slightly. "What does that mean?"